Hola, 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 ¿cómo están, mis amigos y amigas? Me llamo Joe. This is Cinco de Mayo, and I don't know if you see it this way like I do, and I can't speak for Damichael, but when I think Cinco de Mayo, I think fiestas, I think summer heat, I think vacation, and it is vacation for the Memphis Grizzlies. Maybe they're in Cancun, maybe they're elsewhere. Just like we've talked about this week, the front office and the coaching staff has some work to do after their nice little break. So too do the players. We're going to talk about 3 or 4 in particular that we think need the most work or maybe the most room for growth this summer here on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Arriba!
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Bienvenido and welcome to another episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I promise I don't know that much Spanish. The bit is done after that. I am Joe Mullinax, your co-host for this episode, joined once again. Dylan Brooks decided to not have any major news break. So thank you, Dylan. So we can now have Damichael with us, Damichael Cole, the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, the Grizzlies beat writer. We missed you on the Thursday episode. May the 4th be with you if you celebrate Star Wars Day, Damichael. A belated Star Wars Day to you. It is now Cinco de Mayo as I've driven into the ground. And again, that gets me thinking of parties and fiestas and summer. But hopefully there's some work that's going to be done this summer, not just by us here at Locked On Grizzlies, but by some Grizzlies players. We're going to get to that on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. But first, I want to remind you that this episode, like every episode of Locked On Grizzlies, is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out on YouTube, rate, review, subscribe, like, comment, however you get your podcasts, checking it over on YouTube. We're on a heater over on YouTube. We've had over 1,000 views, multiple episodes in a row. Much appreciated. Hopefully we can keep that momentum, keep that energy. We're closing in on 2,000 subscribers. Major stuff for us over at Locked On Grizzlies. Obviously, draft coverage is coming up. We'll talk free agency. Again, we're going to be here. We're going to be here with you all through the offseason, and hopefully you'll stay with us here at Locked On Grizzlies. Damichael, I think you've talked enough about Dylan Brooks. If you really want to give an opinion on it all, I certainly can allow you to, but I think you're good from judging our conversations over the last day or so. And I talked a lot about it yesterday as well. So we're just going to jump right into this idea of improvement for the players. Because on yesterday's episode, I talked about a way that Zach Kleiman can improve, the tripling down on youth. I appreciated that acknowledgement, as we've talked about before. And then I also talked about Taylor Jenkins getting movement out of the pick and roll with Jaren Jackson Jr., using him more in that way. And that name, Jaren Jackson Jr., might be relevant here momentarily, Damichael, because you and we talked before the show about 3 players that we thought needed to improve or had the most room to grow, whatever the politically correct, polite way is to say.
The most important guys. Yeah.
Surprisingly, we agreed on 2 of the 3. So the way that this show is going to run is we're going to talk about the 2 that we agreed on first, and then we'll give the different names that we had at the end of the show. And I'm going to preface all this with saying that if you've been following Locked On Grizzlies for a while now, Zaire Williams already got his shine from us.
Yeah.
That's going to be a foregone conclusion. Zaire going to Summer League, he has to get better, right? Again, Zaire was our guy last offseason, last 3 seasons.
We're pivoting this summer.
We're pivoting, a strong pivot, right? I think that's a fair way to put it. So anyway, with all that being said, we actually agreed, like I said, on 2 of the 3 names. And the first one I'll let you start off with, partner, is one that most Grizzlies fans are probably going to say for maybe surprising reasons, but I think we're going to be in lockstep on those 2.
Yeah, it's the most obvious, I think, one, and not obvious in terms of, this guy needs to get a lot better, but the guy we talk about a lot, and it's Jaren Jackson Jr. Mm-hmm. We got to start there because he was an all-star this season. There was improvement that took place. But this is where I'm going to start, Joe. Look at March. Look at his numbers in March. It's one of the best months, if not the best month, offensively speaking, of his career.
Absolutely.
Why can't he do that over the course of a full season? I don't.
Good question.
There was nothing I saw in March outside of, Ja Morant missed a bunch of games. But even when Ja came back, he was still playing some really good basketball. But my point is, Jaren was dominant. And why he's on this list, because you say, okay, well, he showed the improvement there. No. The playoffs, I feel like there was some regression. And not regression in totality.
Sure.
But I'll say it like this. We saw it against all those teams. I want to see it against the top defenses. Do it when LeBron James and Anthony Davis are guarding you. Yeah. We have now gotten to the point. I remember last season, my first year on the beat, shout out to the Grizzlies fans out there, because one of the things that a lot of you used to say to me was, Jaren doesn't attack mismatches enough. And you know what? I don't think that's a fair assessment anymore. This season, when he had smaller guys on him, it was food. It was food. He took advantage of that for the most part during this season. In March, that's what we saw a lot of. And it gave me to the point, okay, now we see that. We see he has that capability. Now do it against Anthony Davis. Now do it against, LeBron James and those types of matchups. 31 points, I think it was, in game 1 of that series in the first round. And then they started matching up Anthony Davis more on him. Then they had Anthony Davis roaming with LeBron James matched up against Jaren Jackson Jr. And he never had another Jaren-type game. He didn't shoot the ball from 3 well, and he wasn't as forceful inside. I said it before last season. Jaren Jackson Jr. should be shooting at least 5 free throw attempts per game every year going forward. If we're being honest, it should be closer to 7. He has the size. He has the quickness to take big guys off the dribble, and he's just strong enough to be able to create those mismatches. Jaren Jackson Jr. should average over 20 points per game. If not over 20 points per game, I think it is very plausible to say this guy should be averaging 18, 19 points next season on the way to earning his second All-Star berth. That's what you need. And we didn't mention this yet, but I'm going to go ahead and say it because we're not putting Ja and Dez on this list.
No.
For obvious reasons. These two guys are pretty solidified offensively. And you can argue about defensive improvements, but there are bigger issues, I think. But Jaren Jackson Jr.'s offensive improvement is directly tied to how far this team goes.
One of the most fascinating things about this upcoming summer is how Zach Kleiman decides to improve the roster, right? The OG Anunoby thing is out there that everybody's very excited about. Again, him and Mikal Bridges being 1 and Anunoby being 2. Those are probably the 2 best fits alongside these guys moving forward. I think that's fair to say. But Anunoby says similar things to Dillon Brooks in terms of wanting a larger role, right? And Anunoby probably wouldn't have that in Memphis. That is one of the flaws to that plan. So I am curious to see if when these trades go down, they add guys like Dorian Finney-Smith, Alex Caruso.
Yeah.
They improve their veteran depth and continue to accentuate the big 3. And to your point, Jaren averaging 20 or so points a game would be evidence of that. The beautiful thing about this, Damichael, in my opinion, and I agree with everything you said in terms of how he needs to improve, drawing contact, handling the contact better, initiating it in intelligent ways. There's an art to drawing fouls in the NBA, and hopefully he's watching a lot of film of the Joel Embiids and Nikola Jokic.
Well, they do it against him, Joe. So he has the best. He has the best seat
in the house.
Yeah,
that's true. But the thing that I'm most excited about, Damichael, is the fact that he's healthy. Right? I know he had the hand wrist, but that, as we talked about in our injury episode, not necessarily a major deal for him. He should be okay. He had talked about playing with Team USA this summer, or at least training with them and doing those sorts of things. So that tells me that he's interested in developing his game. And for a player that's 23 years old, that has the physical skill set of Jaren, Ja is obviously an athletic diamond in the rough, but Jaren is 6'11", 245 pounds. We've called him Giannis Light on this show before. The fact that he's just healthy enough to actually take this new basketball development for a spin is something to be really excited about. He actually can work on his game this summer instead of just focusing on getting a knee healthy or a foot or whatever the other ailment might be.
Yeah, that's so important for his summer development. He always is one of those players who gets a long list of things to work on for the summer with Taylor Jenkins. And I asked him at the exit interviews, I said, you had the longest, list of things last season. I said, was this year similar? He said, yeah. So Clearly, Taylor Jenkins thinks there are a lot of things that he can improve on to kind of go to that next level. We saw him take the jump, offensively in terms of attacking the mismatches. He shot the ball from 3-point above league average this season. Now go to the next level. You are a walking mismatch. Take advantage of that, and I think he should be much more consistent in that role against not only smaller guys in bad defenses, but bully ball against the bigger bad defenses as well, like a guy like Anthony Davis is doing right now in the league.
No, that's a great example. And I think that maybe he watches some Nikola Jokic film, some old school Marc Gasol film. I want to see him be a better passer because you saw a lot of times they were double teaming down on him, and they're going to have to, because of those mismatches, finding the open man. That's the next step for him offensively. That's going to enable him to be more efficient within his own shooting as well. So Jaren Jackson Jr.
I saw a stat too.
Please go ahead.
It was, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but he had, I think, twice as many turnovers as assists in that series.
Yeah, so absolutely. I believe it completely. Because again, they were double teaming him and he didn't really know how to respond. So working off of that is going to be a major piece of his development. So Jaren Jackson Jr., tremendous season, defensive player of the year. He's one of the best defensive players in the NBA. Continuing to develop that offensive game. That's the next step for him. And again, he's healthy. He'll be able to do that. Hopefully he does train with Team USA this summer. That'll be a great experience for him. So kudos to Jaren on a good year. Continuing to be great is the next step in his progression. Damichael and I, believe it or not, agree on option number 2 for the player with the most potential growth possible in their games this summer. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by eBay Motors. eBay Motors is just like a championship team, because when it comes to a championship team, it's about making sure every player is a perfect fit. The same thing when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. The next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, be sure that every part you need fits right the first time. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know if that part will fit, or you get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you will be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Getting the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. We're going to talk about our second option here next on Locked On Grizzlies. Get excited. Damichael and I agree. Again, stay with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax, joined by my wonderful co-host, Damichael Cole, here on this Friday, the Cinco de Mayo edition of Locked On Grizzlies. And as we've talked about, Damichael of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, I of Bluff City Media, Grizzlies columnist there. Go check out our work, both at Commercial Appeal and Bluff City Media. We agree again. We agreed on Jaren Jackson Jr. and we agreed on option number 2. I'll lead off on this one if it's okay with you, Damichael. And I will focus on Santi Aldama, because this is a young man who had a strong season for the Memphis Grizzlies, stronger than anticipated. I would say Memphis and you and I expected Zaire Williams to be that leaper, right? Yeah. The person that had a strong second season. It was Santi who did some impressive things, scored well from 3, tried to score off the dribble. At times he did, at times he didn't. He has some room for growth defensively in particular, and also physically. So I'll focus on the physical aspect because I'm a big meathead as a football guy. So I can identify with this. There were too many times that the 6'11" Santi Aldama got bodied by people, even wings that were smaller than him in terms of height or length of wingspan. He just didn't have the physical strength to contend against some of these players, and it was evident. He needs a summer with a similar weight gain plan to what Zaire Williams was doing, the giant jug of water that Zaire was carrying around. Santi should be on that plan as well in terms of trying to gain weight, gain muscle mass. Obviously, we don't want him taking home rolls of Oreos and gaining weight that way, but we do want, or I want, to see him get physically stronger so that he can be that true stretch 4 that doesn't get abused defensively in the paint. If he struggles on the perimeter some, that's a little more understandable. But for me, I need that guy to be someone that isn't a liability, given his length and given his size. it was too easy getting to the rim against someone that has a 6'11" frame like Santi Aldama.
Yeah, and it's funny. You started this off by saying Santi had a strong season. I don't know if you were saying. I don't know if you were doing that on purpose.
Right there. Of course I was. Come on. I'm as witty as they come.
It was perfect. It was perfect because you said it. I mean, I can think off the top of my head there was a possession against the Lakers where LeBron James just drove straight to the chest of Santi and just knocked him back. And in theory, Santi is kind of that perfect. He should have been the perfect X factor in that series because he can shoot the 3 ball, which would have put him playing on the floor alongside of Jaren, and you would have had Ja, you would have had Dez, and I think that would have made it more, I guess, respectable to play Dillon Brooks, with guys sagging off him because he would be the only guy in the lineup who wasn't respected, from a 3-point shooting perspective.
Sure.
But it kind of hurt that you had X and Dillon in the lineup and, the spacing and all that. But that's beside the point. The point is Santi gets stronger, which would lead to, better rebounding results, better screening, just more physicality in his game. That changes a lot of things. I mean, I remember early in the season, we talked about it on here. I think you were an early season advocate of more Jaren and Santi lineups once upon a time.
Absolutely.
And
spacing, baby, spacing.
Yeah. And it was kind of a thing, but we saw defensively there were some shortcomings. I know offensively he is super skilled. But I want to point something out because I made that tweet from exit interviews where Santi was talking about possibly eating 6 or 7 meals a day. I mean,
good.
I don't know about you. I don't know about you, but sometimes I don't even like putting down 3 meals a day sometimes. So,
Damichael, hold on. We can all be honest with each other here. If people have been watching on YouTube all season, right? They're looking at us. Do I look like someone who misses many meals? We can be honest here. I do not. I am a recovering fat kid. I openly admit that. And as a recovering fat kid, I drive by a gas station and it's hard for me not to stop because we live in the golden age of gas station food. There's a Sheetz, there's a Wawa, there's all sorts of wonderful places where I can eat. The fact that I'm having this conversation, I'm not sponsored by those places. I am just alluding to the fact that I wish I could be Santi Aldama. Please tell me to eat 6 or 7 times a day. Tell me to. I am so jealous of people like Santi. Go gain some weight. Go eat some food for the people that can't like me.
Well, speaking from a small guy's perspective, Joe, I'll take that perspective on this.
I cannot relate at all.
Say that, look, that's gonna be tough. I mean, and we talked about this throughout the season because going back to Summer League, I remember he was telling me that's the thing he wanted to work on the most was getting stronger. But let's talk about how that plays out because I know there are some people who are worried about this, and I actually asked them about this because I've seen it happen. I grew up around a lot of people who played basketball, and I saw people who were terrific shooters bulk up and they lose their form and things like that. And I talked to Santi about it. I said, hey, people may be worried if you put on 25 pounds and you come back looking like, prime, I'm trying to think of a Grizzlies guy, Stromile Swift or something.
Or like Marc Gasol before he started leaning up, growing his own veggies.
Yeah, right. You come back looking like one of those guys, you could lose some of that. He was a great shooter. You don't want him to lose that. And he brought up interesting perspective, Joe. He said, hey, that's kind of actually happened to him before. And he was growing up as a kid. He hit like a growth spurt, put on some weight. And it wasn't the shooting that he remembered was affected. It was the ball handling that kind of was affected the most. His ball handling kind of was all over the place. So he had to get back to the fundamentals and things like that. So he got back with the fundamentals, and then the shooting kind of came along as well. So he's actually experienced with this. So that led me to believe, hey, look, this guy's going to know how to put on good lean weight where he's able to keep his shooting, where he's able to keep his ball handling, which is a skill that he has offensively as well. And I think it's a promising thing because if he does this, we haven't mentioned it much yet, but Steven Adams, there is the possibility I mean, it's not been ruled out yet. There's the possibility that Steven Adams isn't ready the first game of the season.
Sure.
There's the possibility that you have a 3 big man rotation. There's the possibility that you don't acquire a big man through free agency or through trades, because right now you only have one open roster spot, and we all know where that position should go to more than anything. So there's just a lot to factor in here, and there are a lot of possibilities. But at the end of the day, Santi Aldama's improvement is very crucial to make all those things work.
I would agree. And I think that Santi Aldama is a great example of that development program at play, right? They found a player that they really liked, small school coming out of college, really impressed with his length, how he was able to handle his shooting stroke. He had a strong sophomore season. I did it again. He had a good sophomore season. Is he able to take another leap and be that player? Again, say worst case scenario, Steven Adams can't go and Brandon Clark can't go. We know Brandon Clark's not going to go.
Right.
Say Steven Adams can't either, and you're back in the same position playoffs-wise. You've got Xavier Tillman. You've got Jaren Jackson Jr. Santi has to be able to eat those minutes, and I think that that's really important to manufacture positive strength and development, not just in terms of his basketball skill, but just his physical body as well. So I'm excited to watch Santi do that this summer. I think he had mentioned wanting to play for the Spanish national team over the summer. Having that opportunity is important to him. So keep working on your basketball skills, but just remember, basketball is a lot of cardio, Santi. And if you do a lot of cardio, you burn calories, right? So you got to keep putting calories in to gain that weight. Trust me, I'm an expert. When we come back, we're actually going to disagree, Damichael and I, here on Locked On Grizzlies. It's not a major disagreement. It's just differing tastes in young wings. The third and final, or third and fourth, player that needs to have the best summer, or the possibility for the best summer, coming up next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stay with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, your co-host of Bluff City Media, also of SB Nation, joined by the wonderful, the handsome, the very suave and debonair Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. He covers the Memphis Grizzlies for that website, publication, all those fun things. Between Damichael, myself, and Locked On Grizzlies, we've got you covered as the offseason grinds forward. So stick with us. Please don't go anywhere. We are happy to have you. However you're taking us in, continue to be an everydayer and hang out with us. And I don't know if you heard this or not, Damichael, but we have a wonderful new partnership that we're going to be talking more about next week with SiriusXM, which is a really cool thing. Obviously, there's no games for us to really hype right now. Kind of a bummer. But we have, Locked On Network continues to grow and develop. We have that SiriusXM partnership, and you'll hear more from us about that next week. So just wanted to give a quick shout out to David Locke and all the folks that help manage Locked On Podcast Network, from NFL to NHL, MLB, obviously the NBA section. We continue to grow, and it's a lot of fun to see happen. So shout out to all those that are involved in that development. Speaking of development, Jaren Jackson Jr., Santi Aldama, those are the two that we agree on. We're going to disagree now, and I'm going to let you go first with your disagreement, because the name that you said was intriguing to me. Because to me, this is one of the guys that if I am concocting a trade that doesn't involve the sign and trade of Dylan Brooks,
don't you say this,
I'm moving him on, if I'm being honest. Our mutual friend in Memphis Grizzlies media coverage, Anthony Sane, he said he's done with young guys. And I'm not going to go as far as Sane, but I don't know. And again, LaRavia can shoot threes. We talk about needing spacing. So I can hear that argument. And I think that's going to be part of what you're about to say. But in terms of youth, whether it's Santi Aldama, whether it is my guy, David Roddy, spoiler alert, whether it is Jake LaRavia, your guy, somebody's going to get moved along, I think, this summer if they are going to go bigger. It'll be interesting to see what direction they choose to go.
Jake LaRavia can hoop, man.
He can shoot. And we've talked about this. He's got the stroke.
You can't have enough shooting in the NBA. The Grizzlies don't have enough shooting.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about moving one of the guys who potentially could be one of those knockdown shooters?
I hear you.
Go back to Santi last season. Santi's rookie year. I'm going to circle back here.
Sure.
Santi's rookie year, I remember, not going to say any names, but I remember there were a lot of people in Memphis media who checked out on that guy.
I don't think I did. But you're right. There were some. I know. But
he was down in the G League putting up numbers.
He was balling.
I saw the numbers, I saw the potential, and I was like, I think that guy can play up here. It's going to take some time, but he can play. That's the same feeling I have with Jake LaRavia. Let's just dive into the G League numbers real quick. I saw some of these games too, so not just reading blind numbers off of paper here. He has some stuff in his bag, but 29 minutes per game down there with the Memphis Hustle. 17 games played, Joe. 17.8 points per game, over 4 rebounds a game, 2.5 assists. But his traditional numbers, 18.8 points. 46.6% shooting from the field, 36.4% shooting from three-point range on 7. Oh, you're going to love this. 7.6 3-point attempts per game.
I do over like that.
Over 2.8 makes. You're going to like this too. 86.8% free throw shooting. I mean, look at the Grizzlies. I mean, this is the perfect guy to what we're talking about, the problems that this team has.
In the half-court offense.
Yeah. And he has some of that in this game, too. Jake LaRavia is big. I think people forget that. And as a rookie, he was big. So imagine how big he's going to be as he fills out into the, the quote-unquote grown man body. 6'8", we're talking potentially 230-plus pounds, posting you up. He has a nice turnaround shot. The three-point shot is fluid. It's simple with me. This is your guy who can play the 3, who can downsize to the 4 and hold his own and be on the floor with Desmond Bane, Luke Kennard, potentially at the same time. Like, there is a lot of potential in this guy's game. Defensively, he has potential there as well. I remember I talked to his college head coach, Steve Forbes. We talked on the phone for a while before the season. He was telling me he just has to learn how to get a little bit more selfish with his play in a good way. He doesn't want to shoot enough. And then he came over to the Grizzlies. Everyone was saying, man, we want him to shoot the ball more. 7.6 3-point attempts per game down with the Hustle. I think he's going to have a big summer in Summer League. And guess what? That's a roster spot that's going to be really important. You out of everyone outside of Desmond Bane and Luke Kennard, when you talk about the wing guys, he's the guy I'm most confident in that can take that step as a three-point shooter. And I can't say it enough. This team needs it, Joe. They need it real bad, and he's the guy that can bring it. That's why he's important.
You are a big LaRavia stan. I did not.
I haven't been all season, but he's kind of been in the shadows.
Sure.
And he was the whole time. We're talking David Roddy. We're talking, Kenneth Lofton Jr. He's down there just casually scoring 20 on most nights with the Hustle and knocking down 3 3-pointers. Like,
in
just
the
casually.
G League.
Just like Santi Aldama last season.
Yeah, that's true. But meanwhile, up with the actual big club, my guy, big body David Roddy, was out there hooping at times, doing impressive things against actual NBA competition. Yep. And David Roddy is my guy. Everything you said about LaRavia is fair. And I do think that if it actually comes down to condensing the roster, trading some of these guys away, maybe it's a John Conchar, right? Or something like that. If they can have their druthers, I'm sure they'd rather keep some of these younger players because Conchar's 27. He's one of the oldest guys on the team at this point. Yeah. So, and not necessarily in a veteran way. Like, no offense to John Conchar, I don't think anybody's sitting down for leadership meetings, getting jitty with it. But when it comes to David Roddy, I watched the Philadelphia 76ers play, and I've watched this guy play for multiple teams in the NBA. And in my opinion, every NBA contending team needs a guy like PJ Tucker.
I like that.
And when I see David Roddy, I see PJ Tucker. And I think that is what he can be. Now, PJ Tucker is not a wing. That's extremely important to understand. Can he do that for moments? Yeah, for moments. Even in this older part of his career, he gets caught in a switch on the perimeter for a series or a possession, he'll be okay. He's a big. He's undersized. He's 6'5", 6'6", but he's a big. And he has a low center of gravity, and he has some physical strength to him. He has a frame that can absorb some contact, and he has learned how to play that level of basketball, holding his own both in perimeter defense as well as in the post. You need a dude like PJ Tucker, and I see PJ Tucker when I see David Roddy. But PJ Tucker is a little more limited offensively, whereas Roddy has shown the ability to create off the dribble a little bit, shoot the ball a little bit. If your comp is your ceiling, I should say, is a souped up PJ Tucker, sign me up, man, because I think that is a major piece in modern basketball. You need a guy who is a big, who can play against other bigs, but can also play on the perimeter some, and that is David Roddy. We saw flashes of it with Taylor Jenkins, letting him play some more small ball 4 minutes. I'm hopeful, and again, knock on wood, if Adams can't go, we know Clark can't go, the fourth big, in my opinion, should be David Roddy. Let him have that opportunity. See how he does in those minutes and let him get some run in that role. So I hear what you're saying on LaRavia. He's 6'8". If I have to have LaRavia versus Roddy to defend, let's say Jason Tatum, right? I want Roddy, not LaRavia, because I think Roddy can be physical in a way that LaRavia is not capable of being, or even a Santi Aldama is not capable of being. David Roddy is 6'6", 255 pounds, right? Or 250 pounds, something like that. He weighs more than Santi does, and Santi's 5 inches taller. He's just a thicker, more physically aggressive dude, and I think that he has a skill set that can continue to develop. Doesn't have the highest ceiling in the world. I think LaRavia might even have a higher ceiling.
That's my point.
But I think Roddy. But what are we talking about now? We're not interested in ceilings anymore, right? At least I'm not. I'm closer to sane on that. Okay, I want dudes that can go and play winning basketball. Could LaRavia potentially be that? Yeah, he could also potentially be in the G League again. I've seen David Roddy play in the playoffs. I've seen him play meaningful basketball at the NBA level. I know he has a specific niche role that he can help this team with. And if you want to say LaRavia's niche role is the shooter, Luke Kennard's already on the team.
One shooter's not going to be enough.
Sure. Well, that's what the trade market's for. That's what the MLE is for. If I had to choose today, I would go Roddy over LaRavia. But I think you make a fair argument for him, and that potential is there.
And you made a great point too with the floor. That's my thing with those two guys. Higher floor, David Roddy, because at the end of the day, we saw this guy get thrown on the floor against Kevin Durant as a rookie, against LeBron James when Dylan Brooks was in foul trouble.
And didn't do awful.
This is proven. No, and I've talked to him about this. He's kind of, jokes to me about like how he's kind of got thrown into this role. I've talked to Dylan Brooks a lot. Dylan Brooks is he was like the understudy for Dylan Brooks this season in that role. Jake LaRavia, from what people were saying early in the season, was probably a little bit ahead as a team defender, but Jake LaRavia said, hey, I believe I can defend one-on-one too. Very confident guy. So we'll see. But at the end of the day, the ceiling matters to me because even if he doesn't reach his full ceiling, I think he's still capable. If he gets halfway there, he beats where Roddy is. Roddy, I think, is your prototypical, like you said, PJ Tucker, 3-and-D. He's going to defend his butt off. He's going to run the floor. But there are some limitations there. I think David Roddy is every bit of 6'4.5", 6'5". And we saw a couple times in the Lakers series, for example, where he get offensive rebounds and he's just unable to put it back up. There's not enough height there when you're in there with with all that size that a team that the Lakers kind of have. So that's kind of my only thing. Now we're splitting hairs at the end of the day because I do think Roddy is a plus eventually for this team, but Jake LaRavia I think can be a real plus. And by the way, Zach Kleiman pointed this guy out himself. He said, he basically said he's real excited to see Jake LaRavia this summer, and I tell you what, I'm looking forward to seeing him too down there in Summer League.
And I'm also really excited to see Jake LaRavia as a future member of the Toronto Raptors.
I knew it was coming.
No, I'm not. When Fred VanVleet leaves Toronto, and it's Tyus and LaRavia and a couple of firsts for OG Anunoby, I will love to watch him flourish and develop. No, I'm just kidding. I think that the reality is, we're kind of splitting hairs because these are guys towards the end of the rotation too.
Yeah.
Right? So at the end of the day, Jaren Jackson Jr., John Morant, Desmond Bane, those are the guys whose development is the most important to this core moving forward. But at the same time, they need support, right? And whether it comes from outside the organization which I think we can talk more about next week, what maybe some examples of that could be.
Yeah.
But, from outside the organization, the draft, maybe. I think we've kind of moved past that. Maybe we can have an episode where we attack that idea and philosophy. I think that there is different avenues for those improvements to happen for those guys. They shouldn't completely abandon internal development, because that is where a culture is developed. That is where guys buy into a city, right? A free agent may not be as willing to choose Memphis as a guy who gets drafted there, grows up there, literally. We saw it with Mike Conley, Marc Gasol. You get married there, you have kids there. Like, that is your home. That's where you started your adult life. And that matters, right? Like, that's something that's different than somebody choosing in free agency. Oh, I can choose between Memphis and New York, or Memphis and, Phoenix, places that maybe are more attractive living spots, Memphis and Atlanta even. No offense to Memphis. I love Memphis. But, to get those guys when they're young and to develop them, and that's what they know and that's what they see, they develop a love for the city. And like, I have a love for the city, obviously you do, that matters too. So to have those guys that are homegrown talents, parting with them is difficult. And I think that'll be something that we can kind of explore a little more in depth on future episodes of Locked On Grizzlies here. Thank you so much to everyone who listens and watches Locked On Grizzlies. Again, it's been one of the most successful weeks we've ever had on this show. I went back, and since 2021, when we made the transition to doing YouTube and the stuff on any podcast network that you can find, we've had 2 of the most successful 5 episodes in the history of Locked On Grizzlies in its current iteration this week. So thank you guys so much for helping us continue to grow and develop the podcast. I know Damichael's appreciative. I'll give him a second to touch on it here in a moment. But I just want to say on my end, this first season with Damichael's been amazing, and this week has been really successful. We really appreciate everybody that's given us a shot, and we hope that y'all stick around.
Yeah, I just echo what Joe said. And I mean, it just happens so much. I always go back to, I see, the emails and everyone, in person at Grizzlies games say, hey, we listen to Locked On Grizzlies. We truly appreciate it. And I want you guys to just keep telling us when we say, help us understand how we can continue to improve the podcast. We're really forming something really nice here, really special here. And guess what? The Grizzlies are trending up, I think, this offseason, and Locked On Grizzlies is too.
People are paying more attention to the Grizzlies than they have in the past. And I think that's good for business on the Locked On Grizzlies end, but it's also good for Grizzlies fans, because Memphis, again, a special place. So any chance that Memphis gets to be put in a positive light, right? Like the Dylan Brooks stuff has not been as positive. Whenever Memphis can be put out there in a positive way, I think that's really important. So I'll continue to be that, even though I haven't lived there in a long time. I always defend Memphis and send love to Memphis, and I'll continue to do so. And obviously Damichael will as well. So thank you, everyone that checks out Locked On Grizzlies. Continue to do so. Continue to be an everydayer as the season grinds forward. And we come back next week, like I said, maybe we start looking at roster construction, how the Grizzlies can improve, maybe do some player reviews. Who had the best season for Memphis? Who was their MVP? Who was their LVP, their least valuable player? Lots of different angles we can take as the offseason unfolds, and we hope that you'll be there with us for every which way the road that is the Grizzlies offseason can turn and twist. But for Damichael, my wonderful co-host, I am Joe Mullinax. Enjoy your weekend. Be safe. We will see you on Monday. Stay locked in. This is Locked On Grizzlies.